And welcome back. We have a Chevy HHR that we're going to be replacing the front struts. Now I'm only going to show you how to do one side because the other side is exactly the same way. Now I'm using an impact gun, so that's why I'm raising up the car first, and then I'm going to remove the wheels. If you do not have an impact gun, make sure you loosen the lug nuts before you even lift up the car. As you can see, I'm lifting the car up from the subframe. It's right in front of the radiator right here. And as far as the jack stands, again, you want to place them on the subframe on each side of the car. It's the strongest place to hold the car up. Once you have your jack stands in place, you can go ahead and remove your floor jack. Now, always use jack stands. Never lift up a car and rely on the floor jack to hold it up, and especially never get underneath a car that's being held only with a floor jack. And also, once the car's up, go ahead and put wheel chocks on the back of your wheels to make sure the car doesn't roll. I have actual wheel chocks. You can use a piece of wood, a brick, anything. You just want to prevent the car from rolling while it's up on jack stands. It's time to unbox the new struts, and as you can see, they come as a complete assembly, so it's the fastest, most efficient way to get this job done. As you can see, they're stamped FL and FR. That stands for front left and front right. And in case you're wondering which is which, just imagine sitting in the driver's seat. So your left hand side would be the left side of the vehicle, and the right hand side obviously the right side of the vehicle. Now that we have our wheel removed, grab our penetrating oil and just spray all of the fasteners that we plan on removing just to make them come off a little bit easier. Grab the nut that you just removed, and we're going to flip it around and thread it right back onto the bolt, and we're going to try to get it as flush as we can. The reason for this is we're going to be hitting it with the hammer to try to get the bolt to come out, and you don't want to damage any of the threads, so the nut just kind of protects the threads on the bolt. And one more tip is to grab a wire brush. Just try to clean off any dirt, debris, or rust off of the threads, and it usually does help for getting nuts off. Now I know it looks like I gave up very easily on trying to remove the nut off of the stabilizer link, but in fact I did actually try to get it off. I tried coming from behind with some vice grips and that didn't work. There's actually no flat surface to put a wrench on, and after a few minutes of trying, I just thought it was faster to just go ahead and cut it off, and we're going to end up replacing the stabilizer link. For the next step, we're going to need the floor jack, so place it right underneath the brake rotor, and we're going to lift up the suspension just enough to take tension off of the two bolts. With some of the load taken off of the suspension, you can see that the bolts just slide right out. Now that we've taken care of everything on the suspension side, we're going to come up here underneath the hood On the strut tower, we're going to see the 3 fasteners, and we have to remove all 3 of them in order to remove the strut. Now, before you completely remove this last nut, make sure you reach around the bottom and hold the strut with one of your hands, and then you can go ahead and remove the last nut. If you take off the nut without holding the strut, it's going to fall and possibly damage something on the vehicle, or even worse, hurt yourself. So just make sure you're holding the strut before you remove that last nut. Now here's the nut on the original strut. Granted, it has many years on it, but the new one comes with this piece of tape over it, and I'm just going to leave it in place. It's not going to do any harm. And now you just have to grab your strut that's appropriate for this side of the vehicle, and it's just like removing the old one. You're just going to have to lift it up and try to align the 3 holes on top. And then once you get that all settled in, you could reach around the top with your other hand and put on at least one of the nuts to hold the strut in place so it doesn't fall back out. Now the knuckle needs to slide back into the strut. I'm just going to go at it with my wire brush and just try to clean off whatever I can. The cleaner it is, the easier it is for it to slide back onto the strut. And here's where you can use the floor jack to your advantage. You just want to raise or lower the knuckle to try to get the hose to align so you could fit the bolts right through it. Another trick is to grab a screwdriver and put it in one end, and you can use it to get the leverage that you need to align everything. Even though we're replacing the struts on the HHR, this car has no adjustable camber or caster. So technically everything should line up in its original place and nothing should have moved out of place. Of course, you can still take it into a shop if you like to get everything double checked, but my personal opinion, I don't think it's going to need a wheel alignment. And of course, you should always follow the torque specs. If you over tighten something, there's a possibility you could pull the threads and damage something, which means you're gonna have to go out and get a new fastener anyways. And these are not just regular fasteners. You would have to go to a dealer to get these things. Now if you leave it too loose, there's a possibility that one of these fasteners could come off while you're driving, and trust me, that's the last thing that you want. It's very dangerous. So to play it safe, just make sure you follow the torque specs and do it right the first time. Now, if you were able to remove your stabilizer link right off of the strut, something I was unable to do, at this point you would just go ahead and connect your stabilizer back up to your strut and torque it down to spec. Now, in my case, you saw that they would not come off, so I had to cut it off. And this, after you pop off the joint, this is what's left. And I'm showing on the other side because for some reason I forgot to film it. So this is the other side of the vehicle. All I did was come at it with a cutoff disc, and now we're back on the correct side again. So after that, I just used a very aggressive grit just to get rid of any remaining metal, and I was able to pop the other end of the fastener right out to the backside. Since I came at the stabilizer bar with my grinder and I took off some of the paint, I decided to grab a rattle can and go ahead and repaint it just to prevent any rust from happening. And I gave it 2 coats and I let it dry in between, so it was perfectly dried by the time I put the new stabilizer link on. And as you can see, I have the top half already on and torqued down. Now let's go ahead and put on the lower end of the stabilizer link. Once you're all done with the stabilizer link, go ahead and put your wheel back on, put the lug nuts on it, and just snug them down as best as you can. Now we're going to go ahead and raise up the car again so we could remove the jack stand. And now that the car is back on the ground, you can go ahead and torque down the lug nuts to spec. Do not forget about the wheel chocks on the rear wheels. And that's pretty much it for how to change your own struts. So, as you can tell, the video was a lot of work, so I hope you give it a thumbs up. I hope it helped you, and like always, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.